Okay, today we're going to talk about graphing, and mostly we're going to be talking about graphing lines, but we might look at some other things as well, like in the next problem we have a quadratic. So actually when you graph any equation, the most basic way to graph, and sometimes people will say they don't know how to graph something, the most basic way to graph is to start by creating a table of values. So if I want to make a table of values, I can just draw a table here, and then I'm going to choose values for x, and whatever I do, I'm going to plug that number in for x that I choose into the equation negative 1/3 times x plus 4, and that will give me a value for y, and that x and y are going to form an ordered pair, correct? This might be a review for some of you. What values should I choose in my table for x, do you think? Yeah, I actually could choose anything. 0 is a really convenient one. In fact, I'll put it right here in the middle, 0. Why would you choose 0? Well, 0 is so easy, right? If you plug in 0, what do you get? You get negative 1/3 times 0 plus 4, and you get 4. So that translates into an ordered pair. I could have actually done a third column on my table, but it would have run into my my graph here. But that ordered pair would be 0, 4. So when I'm going to set this up for graphing, what kind of things should I do to get it ready, the actual graph paper ready to draw a graph? Yeah, I want to draw my x and y axis. So if I draw this is also called another name for this is this is the vertical axis, because you don't always have to use the variable y as your dependent variable. Your independent variable, or your horizontal axis, your y-axis, or I'm sorry, your x-axis. I'm drawing the x-axis, saying the y-axis. Okay, so if I want to actually put points, what should I do to these axes so that I can actually plot some points on here? I need numbers, right? So I would want to have a scale. And what should my scale be? I can actually count by anything on the y-axis and anything on the x-axis. But here at the middle, we call this the origin, 0, 0. And I didn't really actually mean to plot that point, because that's not the point that I'm gonna graph. But here I could start with this 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. Notice that I'm drawing the numbers right on the line. It could look convenient to have the numbers in between the lines, but the problem is, where would I actually plot the point? So a lot of times that's a misconception people will have, is just that we'll put the numbers in between, but you will actually want to label the line. So here we'll just use a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. And then if I want to plot this point, 0, negative 4, I start at the origin, and I go up, or I go over 0, and I go up 4. So this point right here is 0, 4. What do we call that point? Since it's on the y-axis, we call it the Y-intercept. Now, some of you might know how to graph using the slope, because this is a linear equation. Actually, when you look at this, how do you know that it's going to graph a line? Or do you know that just by looking at it? Y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. And so if I want some other points to graph, what other points should I use? Should I plug in x is 1? I could, but look what happens if I plug in x is 1. I would go negative 1/3 times 1 plus 4. Now I'm going to have to graph a fraction. So if I had to graph a fraction, I mean, that would be negative 1/3 plus 4. Does anybody know what that is? Basically, you're taking 1/3 away from 4. So isn't that 3 2/3? You could probably get fancier with that, maybe make it into an improper fraction. But you can see where if I go over 1 and I have to go up 3 2/3, it's a little bit tricky to graph that, isn't it? Well, when it comes to a fraction, how could I get only whole number points? Or, I mean, even integer points. So no fraction points. Does anybody have any thoughts about that? If you use, what's that? Yes, if you use multiples of the denominator, you're going to get whole number points. So what are the multiples of the denominator? What does that mean? Yes. So, right, 3 is the smallest multiple of 3. You could do 3, -3, maybe -6, -9. I mean, those numbers are not actually on my graph right here. I would have had to change the scale to fit some of those on here. But if I plug in +3, I get -1/3 times 3 plus 4. What's -1/3 of 3? Yeah, it's -1. -1 plus 3, -1 plus 4, is 3, right? -1 plus 4 is 3. So my other point would be x is 3, y is 3. So I go 3, 3, and here's my point, 3, 3, right? Did I plot that correctly? 3, 3. If I want to get a point over here in this area, I could use -3. If I have -1/3 times -3 plus 4, what would that be? Negative times a negative is a positive. 1/3 of 3 is 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. And maybe I shouldn't have drawn on those other spots, but so if I go over to -3, I go up to 5. Here's my point, -3, 5. And now, how many points do I technically need to draw a line? Yeah, I only need 2, but I'm considering a third point as a checkpoint, because if I mess one up, all of these points should be able to draw a line, to graph a line. Okay, and if I want to check that, I might use my Desmos. So I'll go over here onto my Desmos app. I've already actually typed that equation in, and it looks pretty good. Okay, so if you have the app on your phone, you could try out graphing with Desmos. Another thing that's really cool is if you select the equation and then you use this little gear icon, you can actually create a table of values. So what I did is I clicked on the table, and now I have a table of values. There's my point 0,4. And then you can see that all of these other points, 1 and 2, give me decimal, which is the same thing as fraction, right? It gives me fraction answers, and those are hard to graph. So that's why if we always use the idea of multiples of the denominator, oops, except for, why did I do that? Backspace. I meant to type in 3. Oh, I already had 3. 3, 3. So if you're typing in any numbers on your table, it's going to just automatically generate the Y value. I mean, I had to do it by hand to create a table by hand, but the idea is if I use multiples of the denominator, then I get these whole number values. Now, we're going to talk later about graphing using the slope and the Y-intercept, but does anybody know how you would, do you remember how you could graph using the slope and the Y-intercept? Just as a little review here. We could start by graphing the Y-intercept 0, 4. Here's the Y-intercept. When we plug in 0, we get 4. So 0, 4 is the Y-intercept. Now, if we use the slope, -1 over 3, that means a rise over run. So if I rise a -1, I actually go down 1. And then I run 1, 2, 3. There's the next point. Or you could say that's 1 over -3 is the rise over the run. And I go up 1, backwards 1, 2, 3. And that's the same way. And I could keep going, right? Up 1, back 1, 2, 3. There's another point right there that I almost put in my table. Can anyone tell me what they think this point might be? -6, good. And positive 6, yeah, because I didn't put that on my scale, positive 6. So if I put in, I took negative 1/3 times negative 6 plus 4, that should give me a positive 6, does it? What's negative 1/3 times negative 6? 2. 2 plus 4 is 6. There we go. So that's the idea, is you can graph using a table of values, graph a line using a table of values.